Hi, folks. Welcome to Butcherbird Presents. I'm Lillian Diaz-Prisbol, and I'm here with Margaret Dunlap,
Hi,
who is our guest for this week.
Here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Margaret is a writer, producer, content creator, and specifically one of the things I wanted to talk about this week was serialized narrative, and because that's something that I feel like covers a lot of the different things that you've done in cool and exciting ways. As always, we're here at Butcherbird Presents. Please like us on Facebook. If you have questions that come up, just comment in the comments feed, and we will try to answer them. So
we will try to come up with something resembling an answer.
So let's start by talking a little bit about your background.
Okay.
So, how did you become a writer? Sort of what made you want to become a writer? What do you think is really exciting about writing?
Really exciting about writing. I don't know that writing and excitement are usually put together in the same place, though, which isn't to say it can't be an exciting job. But I first got into writing seriously when I was in college. Mm-hmm. I think I wound up in a playwriting class my sophomore year because I had an open hole in my schedule and my roommate was in it. Mm-hmm. And I figured, well, if she can take playwriting, then I can take playwriting, because the arrogance of youth, I suppose. But it was like one of those, like, it was an advanced class. Like, you had to permission of the instructor. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't, yeah. And then I was like, well, if she can get permission of the instructor. And I walked in and I talked to the instructor, and he's like, have you ever written a play before? And I go, no. And he goes, great, and signed the form. And I come back and I talk to my roommate, and she's like, and I'm like, yeah, how did it go? And she's like, yeah, no, I went in and said, you know, have you ever written a play before? And she's like, yeah, I've written a couple. They're produced at my high school, and this. And he said, great, and signed the forms.
So permission was really like just a formality.
It was fairly easy to get. It was also a very small school, so adding 2 freshmen to the class meant that there were, or I guess 3 freshmen to the class, but it meant it went from a class of 3 to being a class of 6.
Nice.
So there is an inducement to, you know, add a couple people who seem reasonable to it. But I did playwriting, and then he offered a semester course in screenwriting, so I took that. And then there was screenplay too, so I took that. And by that point, I was most of the way through my first feature, so I did an independent study so I could finish it. And, you know, and then it sort of went from there. I eventually, after college and took a couple years off, moved to Los Angeles. I did my MFA in, I think, the MFA in screenwriting at USC. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, just working in the entertainment industry for, you know, probably about 4.5 years. Mm-hmm. Everybody said when we were in film school, it's like, oh, you know, 5 years, you'll either be doing this job or you'll have decided to do something else. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it was kind of eerie, because I think like 5 years is about the time of, like, you figure, like, you make that breakthrough, or you're like, God, this is just not worth my time, and there are other things that I would rather do.
That's interesting. I actually hadn't heard the 5-year mark before, but it totally makes sense.
Which isn't to say, like, which isn't to say that after 5 years I was, like, working securely and I've never had a day job or anything like that. But it was sort of like, by that point, I had made enough headway that it was like, okay, I could see this being an actual viable job and career path. You know, and it was like literally 4.5 years, and I'd been working at Baseline Studio System for a while, and, you know, tutoring, all kinds of I was a temp at the back when it was a Hilton by the Burbank Airport. I worked there for a while as a temp. But about 4.5 years in, I got my first job on a TV show, which was as the writer's assistant on The Middleman, which had been created by Javier Grisha-Marxuach, who'd been my mentor out of USC. Okay. Because they had a program that's like, you know, agree to meet for lunch and be available by phone for a year. And we got along well. And so it turned into more than that. And, you know, years later, he was in the position, and he's like, well, you know, you don't have any experience. I can't sell you as a staff writer yet, but I'm going to hire you as the writer's assistant. We're going to get you a script in the back 9. And we didn't get a back 9, but, you know, Javi being Javi, he made sure I got a script anyway. And that was my first sort of break-in job.
Which is a good, like, kind of reminder that not that everything in Hollywood is about connections in the way of like you need somebody sort of up there to kind of pull you along, but just you never know who you meet along the way, who's going to be the person who pushes you over the edge and like gives you that opportunity that kind of changes things for you. So
Yeah.
So speaking of the Middleman,
Speaking of Middleman, because we could talk about networking.
we could. But speaking of Middleman, we have the trailer for it for you. So Griffin, let's roll that.
Wendy Watson's life was falling apart.
You're breaking up with me for a class project?
And since she can't save herself, she might as well save the world.
I happen to be a pacifist.
They fight evil so you don't have to.
You're getting paid more than $9 an hour for this job, right?
The new original series, The Middleman, premieres Monday, June 16th, only on ABC Family.
Trippy.
That was just such a fun show. It's just a shame that it didn't last more than a season.
Yeah, the fun fact I just remembered as we were watching that is Lacey has the line, "You're making more than $9 an hour for this job," right?
Yeah.
At one point, there's a prop that's Wendy's first paycheck from the Middleman organization, and like you weren't going to see it on camera. We didn't need an amount. You know, props is like, you know, how much should this check be for? We're like, you're not going to see it on camera, but props being props, they're like, yeah, you say that, and then we're going to need a close-up, and we're going to be the ones in trouble, so how much should we put it? And there's this awkward pause, and so I just blurted out my weekly salary. And yeah, I remember hubby looking at me, he goes, "After taxes?" And I go, "Yeah." Realizing what I had done, he's like, "Yeah, we'll go with that."
Yeah.
So Wendy and I were making the same amount of money for that show.
Nice. Which, as a writer's assistant, is not a lot of money.
It's not a ton of money, though. Given the work that I'd been doing, it felt like a
Right.
princely song at the time.
So this was kind of one of the first shows on ABC Family, wasn't it? As when they were kind of new to being a network, it felt like this was in the early stages of their sort of, or like when I guess when I started to become really aware of like what they were doing, and that there was this kind of cool, female-oriented, kind of older teenage-oriented almost network that had kind of popped up that was different from CW and what was going on in like WB at that point.
Yeah.
So-
In that sense, I think we were part of that wave because obviously ABC Family had been around and they'd been producing stuff for a while. But their first kind of breakout show was Greek.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the fraternities and sororities on the campus, and then the Middleman came aboard, and it was kind of exciting because they were kind of setting out to be, it's like, you know, as Javi said to us one time, it's like they are setting up to be the next WB, and we are going to be their Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then very fittingly, the creator of Seventh Heaven put a show on ABC Family called The Secret Life of the American Teenager.
Yep.
That redefined what successful ratings were on that network.
Yep.
And yes.
And they were like, I think we want to go teen soap opera rather than superhero, you know, comedy.
And
So-
to give full credit to ABC Family, they were incredibly supportive of our show. You know, it's like nobody could have looked at our numbers and blamed them if they'd aired like 2 episodes and been like, you know what? It's enough of this.
Yeah, yeah.
But they really were. They liked the show. They stood by the show. There are people who I run into at conventions or something. I was like, you were on the wrong network. It's like, but we were on the network that wanted to put us on the air.
Right.
It's sort of,
we were on the network that worked.
Yeah, it's
that,
like,
that hired
it's
us.
not that we didn't. It's not that like the first place. I assume the first place that Javi took it wasn't. It's like, I know ABC Family.
Yeah.
Which I hope that the people at Freeform do not take amiss. But it's like, you know, you take your show and you shop it around, and the people who want to put your show on the air, the place that's where you want to be. And they were great. And it's like, so how are the ratings? Like, it's going to be a great DVD box set. And indeed it is.
Yeah.
So,
But I feel like it's had a long kind of lifespan in terms of the fan community. So like I know that they did a spin-off comic series for a while, and I mean it's still something that I feel like pops up in sort of my Tumblr feed, since I'm kind of too old for Tumblr, but I'm still a big Tumblr fan.
yes. Well, that was because it started out as Javi originally wrote the pilot and the pilot script, and then and nobody liked it. He's like, his agent didn't like it. Nobody wanted it. And then he was working, a few years later, he's working on Lost, and he meets some people there, like, why don't you do it? I think Paul Dini, but don't get me wrong, it's not actually my story. I'm sorry, Holly. But anyhow, he developed it as a comic book at Viper Comics, and that he did 3 sort of arcs of that, which were each approximately an episode worth. And then that became the proof of concept that helped him sell it as a TV show. And then when the show ended, we kind of lost an episode at the end, so he did the final episode as a comic book, and then a few years ago, he did the epic comic, bringing together the comic book continuity and the TV show continuity together into this big thing, and we had a live table read.
Oh, cool.
They were just down at the Austin TV Festival talking about it, so
Yeah.
it has had this wonderful life. You know?
Yeah. I find that kind of reassuring, actually, because as someone who's a former comic book editor, still kind of part-time comic book editor,
Yeah.
anytime I say that to somebody in Los Angeles, they're always like, well, I've got this screenplay that I'd love to do as a comic, as like a proof of concept. And I always roll my eyes at that. But to be fair, I guess it works sometimes.
Yeah, I
so.
mean, I think the key is that Javi also loves comic books, and so like, I think when you're making something to be a comic purely as a calling card, then everyone can kind of tell that this isn't what you wanted it to be. Whereas if you make a really good comic book, then it becomes the intellectual property that somebody wants to do something with.
Right.
I think you see that a lot in the web community as well, where you have people, it's like, well, we'll make this as a web show, so this will be my calling card, so I can get, quote unquote, real work in TV or movies or whatever that is. And to a certain extent, there is a feeder to a certain extent, because there's not a lot of money in web, and we all like to eat. So, getting the TV, the more traditional media work can be really helpful, that just as a means of survival. But if you're making a web series that's like, well, we're just going to do like 3 episodes as the proof of concept, and then we're going to get snatched up and turned into something, it's like, no, if you're making a web series, make a freaking web series.
So that's a really natural segue to, I don't know if that was directly the next stage of your career or sort of like what happened post Middleman. But
well, post Middleman, I worked on a couple of other TV shows. I was on, many. It was the beginning of several shows that only lasted a season before they got canceled. For a while, The Middleman was the longest running show.
Wow,
I had ever worked.
A whole 12 episodes.
Whole 12 episodes. Well, because my next show ran for 10, and the following show I worked on, we did not actually make any episodes of the TV show. So that was exciting in and of itself. After that, I worked for about a season and a half on Eureka, which certainly lasted longer than 12 episodes. And after that wrapped up, I was sort of, noodling around at loose ends, as happens when your show gets canceled. And Bernie Sue reached out on Twitter, and I'd known him socially. We'd crossed paths in geeky Los Angeles kind of circles. And
it's a really small world.
It is.
It's weird how small it is.
Yeah, it's like Los Angeles is this huge sprawling city, and it is an incredibly small town in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
So don't talk crap about people, because they will hear about it.
And I think particularly in, when you narrow it down to sort of the geek focused stuff too, as much of a boom as there's been in sort of geek oriented media,
it's a community.
It's amazing how much overlap there is.
Yeah.
So
he suggested we grab coffee, and I was like, all right, because people are continually grabbing coffee in Los Angeles. It's what we do. And we went out.
It's because we all just need to get out of the house.
We all need to get out of the house. You don't have an office. It's like, oh, we'll have a meeting, and it's getting coffee. And we're talking, and he's telling me about this project he has with this guy named Hank, and they're going to, take, novels in the public domain and, try to adapt them, vlog style for a young female audience. I'm like, oh, so you're going to do Pride and Prejudice on YouTube? And he looks at me and says, actually, we're doing exactly Pride and Prejudice on YouTube. Would you like a job?
And you're like,
I'll think about that.
Jobs are cool.
We'll see how that goes. And so, that was how I started on the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which was, started as this very small kind of project. We had Hank Green had said that, it worked out the funding. It's like, okay, we can fund 3 months of this. And we're like, all right, so if it...
Is that 3 months of weekly episodes?
3 months of weekly episodes.
So for those of you who don't know, describe what the Lizzie Bennet Diaries is.
Well, the Lizzie Bennet Diaries it's still up on the internet.
Sure.
We'll say
it still exists.
It's there. It was a modern day adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, based around Lizzie Bennet, who is in our world a grad student burdened with student debt instead of a landed family with no prospects. And she is making a vlog about her life and her sisters and her marriage-obsessed mother and the new rich neighbor who's just moved there. And it's all done vlog style. She's talking to the camera the whole time. And and
let's
it
watch a clip
ran
of it.
twice weekly episodes for 50 weeks.
Twice weekly, okay.
Yeah.
And we have a sample of one of those episodes right here. Griffin, roll when you're ready.
On the theory that the internet is as bored stiff as I am with the continuing Bing Lee saga, I'm going to try a surefire method to boost my viewership. Posting cute pictures of cats! But not just cats by themselves, because cats you've seen. But a cat with another cute furry animal. So... My name is Lizzie Bennet, and I'm going to show you a cat playing with... a chinchilla. So without further ado, here is picture number... Jane. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were shooting. No, it's fine. It's fine, because Shar can edit this out later.
You're never going to believe what happened at work today.
They realized what a creative genius you are and decided to start paying you a living wage?
Slightly more believable than that.
I got nothing.
Being sent flowers.
To your office?
Yeah.
That's such a charming show.
Yes,
So-
we did show a picture of a cat with a chinchilla at the end of the episode.
Oh,
So it was
we
not
missed
an
it.
entire cat chinchilla
Griffin, why didn't you
tease.
line that up for us? So that's a lot of episodes. So you said how many weeks?
Ran for 50 weeks.
50 weeks, okay.
We took, I think, 2 hiatus weeks over basically the Christmas holidays to give ourselves a break.
And so I think I first heard about this when it was airing on YouTube, kind of in its initial run. And what was also interesting is you were doing a lot of other social media tie-ins as well. So like everybody had their own Twitter feed, or talk a little bit about the different sort of transmedia spin-offs that were happening at the same time.
Well, this was, and I have to give full credit to Jay Bushman, ably assisted by Alexandra Edwards, for making all of that happen. But the idea was, we started out, we're making this, that shot in the bedroom, the camera never moves. Like we had, for months, we had one set, then we had our second location, which was we painted a wall of Jenny Powell, our producer's bedroom, turned the camera 90 degrees, and that was Netherfield.
Wow.
But yeah, we really were doing it, and initially the only characters that we had on screen were Lizzie, her older sister Jane, who you saw in the clip, younger sister Lydia, and her friend Charlotte. Everybody else is only talked about. But knowing Pride and Prejudice, you've got all these other characters, and especially you've got the Netherfield contingent, which is Bingley, his sister Caroline, and his friend Darcy. And they've all moved in. And so a way to sort of give characters a presence without, having to find and pay actors, which we could not do at that point, we did eventually, they all had in-character Twitter accounts. So it also kept things alive between episodes. We aired every Monday and Thursday. I'm sure someone will correct me if I got that wrong. But it was... that would happen. But then on the other days, you would have Lizzie and Charlotte tweeting with each other. You also had these big events that were going on. You'd have the wedding where Jane and Bing meet for the first time. We can't do that because it's not taking place in Lizzie's bedroom. But we would have the characters on the Saturday before the episode where they talked about the wedding would tweet, it's like, oh my God, I'm stuck at this wedding. I have to dance with Darcy. Help me, please.
Wow.
And that it created that extra layer of immersion. In addition to Twitter, we had a bunch of other platforms. The team got really creative with that. There was, Mr. Collins has a LinkedIn profile. Wickham had an OkCupid.
I can
Darcy's-
both of those concepts are so like hilarious and horrifying at the same time.
Darcy's sister Gigi, actually, she doesn't appear until I think month 10 out of 12. But very early in, Jay gave her an account on This Is My Jam, which is just posting, this is what I'm listening to right now.
Yeah.
And but he did this for like months. And if
Wow.
you go, you can sort of hear she's listening to a lot of really sad songs, and then she's starting to feel better and more empowered. And it's like this completely, non-prose, indirect storytelling that I don't know if a lot of people found it. Like, we had to be careful on Twitter. Any variant of our character names, as soon as we created the account, someone would find it. We got to pull off the surprise of the people at Netherfield had been tweeting for 2 weeks, and you didn't realize that they were there. We got to pull that surprise exactly once. And it was delightful because, Lizzie posts that Jane and Bing are following each other, and they're like, Bing has a Twitter account. Oh my
And then
God,
they go
his
and
sister
read,
and Darcy have a Twitter
Right.
account. They've been tweeting for weeks. Like, it was a beautiful reveal. But once you've done that once, everyone immediately starts looking for all the other characters to find out what other Easter eggs we've hidden in there.
Did you know, like, right from the start that it was going to be a success? Like, was there a sense of momentum right out of the gate?
As we started airing, like, I laughed. It's like, because you start and you never know if something's
Sure.
going to be a success. But in fairness, when the episodes first began to air, it did do very well very quickly. And I think one thing that really helped get the ball rolling on that was we were a couple, maybe 4 episodes in, so like 1 or 2 weeks into the run. On one of his other channels, Hank Green posts about, I'm doing this project, maybe you should check it out. And that got us a good bump. And that, I think, was enough of an initial seed that it started spreading from there.
It's the 5-year anniversary of Lizzie Bennet,
5-year
is that right?
anniversary
So
of
that was
Lizzie Bennet,
2012 was when it started airing then? So Hank Green had already a good, like, solid internet presence at that point.
Yes,
He
the Vlog Brothers
Vlog
were
Brothers.
very much a thing at that point.
Got it.
So he had that, and I think his initial estimate when he and Bernie had talked about it is like, I can maybe drive, 10,000 eyeballs. And we're like, well, 10,000 eyeballs.
Yeah.
But very quickly, from Monday to Thursday, like the Monday episode would have 60,000 views by the time we had the Thursday episode up.
Wow.
And what in some ways is even more impressive is you look at the number of views we have on episode 100, which does not make sense if you haven't watched the other 99 episodes. And the fact that we're able to get that sort of push, that people stuck with it.
Yeah.
We had enough of a seed to get that core group that at the time at least was not being served by scripted internet programming. Like there was a lot of beauty vlogs, it's not that there wasn't video content for young women on the internet, but there was nothing like Lizzie Bennet.
Yeah, I don't think there was any real, like, narrative out there in that way.
Most of the narrative content, like Red versus Blue, when we would do the awards sort of circuit of like the Streamies or IAW TV, like our category was always like us, Halo 4, Forward Unto Dawn, H+, the digital series. I love that like everything in our category had like a colon on it.
Yeah.
But every time someone would say Halo 4, I'd just be like, Forward Unto Dawn. But that was sort of, it was a lot of kind of male gamer, which isn't to say that women aren't video gamers.
Sure.
But the default assumed audience for a lot of that content
was dudes.
Was dudes.
Yeah.
And there was this audience that wanted to consume content online, that was spending a lot of time online, that had... that already had fan communities, and we had a content that appealed to that community, and they found it and they evangelized for it.
So I'm curious, just kind of from a production standpoint, were you filming multiple episodes at once, or were you really kind of going in and like how far ahead were you planning? Did you have sort of most things kind of written out before you really? I mean, obviously we all know how Pride and Prejudice goes, so there's a pretty clear roadmap, but like. How did sort of the creation of that long format storytelling come about?
We shot on a monthly schedule.
Okay.
So eventually what worked out is that we would have, we would shoot 9 episodes because we'd shoot 4 weeks. So that's 8 regular episodes, plus there'd be a Q&A episode once a month. So we'd shoot 9 episodes on a Saturday, all day. And Ashley Clements, such a trooper. Oh my God. Because we would be shooting like...
It's like just her.
Like a
for that
56-page
whole time.
day is what that worked out to be.
Yeah.
We tried to do a 64-page day. That was the limit. We had
Yeah.
to cut some pages out of that.
Yeah.
But
But 60 pages you could.
56 is about as hard as you want to go. But, the camera doesn't move. The lighting stays really static. Resetting between episodes, the actors have to change their outfits and change their hair. And that's the big sort of time sink, whereas in most traditional production, you have to relight sets, you have to move cameras.
Right.
We weren't doing any of that, so that's what let us get away with that kind of page count. But in one day, we would shoot those episodes. Then the following week, sort of the writers would have a kind of little breather week. Then we'd get the staff together. We would break the next month's worth of episodes. People would have about a week to write their first drafts. Those would come back in. We'd, ask for rewrites or, do a polish. Then we'd go into rehearsal, and then the following week we'd shoot. Wow. So, yeah, and again, it was this sort of, it was the pressures of the budget that we had. Like, we could afford one shoot day because that was as much as we could pay people for.
Right.
And I remember, going in, Burry's like, all right, well, we're going to shoot 8 episodes. I'm like, yeah, what's your backup plan if we can't shoot 8 episodes? Because I'm coming out of television.
Yeah.
A 12-page day is heroic.
Yeah.
But no, instead it was, but we got it done, and, give tremendous credit to our cast and to our crew, who were incredibly hardworking. The amount of passion that everybody put into this project. Because they loved the work and they loved the book, and everyone just did a tremendous amount of work on this. And,
So let's jump forward a little bit to Sanditon. So Lizzie Bennet was a huge success. It kind of spawned a
And then there
number
was
of different,
Sanditon.
of kind of there's an adaptation of Little Women that's been done by sort of a related group. There's
I think March Family Letters came later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Emma Approved and Sanditon. So
Sanditon came between Lizzie Bennet and Emma Approved.
okay.
Basically because as we're coming to the end of Lizzie Bennet, this is where you run into the difference between people who come from TV and people who work in the web world. Because people who come from TV, it's like, okay, we'll take a break, we'll have a couple months off, and then, launch the new show.
Right.
And the people in the web world were like, no, we can't have no content
Yeah.
coming up. And so Sanditon was created to be that kind of summer bridge series. Between while Emma was getting set and in pre-production and development, it would be something that would sort of keep the channel alive, keep the fans engaged. And
So tell us a little bit about what the plot of Sanditon is, and then we'll watch a little clip from it.
yay. Well, the plot for Sanditon was...
For those who don't know, tell us what Sanditon is to begin with, because the other stuff that we're gonna, obviously Lizzie Bennet Diaries is coming from a completed novel.
Right.
Emma Approved is coming from a completed novel, but Sanditon is not.
Sanditon was the last manuscript that Jane Austen was working on when she died. She wrote about 12 chapters, and before she passed away, and over the years, people have published completions of Sanditon, but what Jake pitched to us, which I think was a really fun idea, is that one of the things that people had asked us a lot on Lizzie Bennet is how can the audience affect the story? And we're like, well, we all know what happens in Pride and Prejudice. There's not a lot of leeway here. Sanditon was a world that had been established, but there wasn't a lot of story. So what we did is we created our own characters based on the characters from the novel. And and created their sort of love stories and Gigi's trials and tribulations as she's trying to figure out what to do next with her life, because her brother's off in a relationship and she's not sure if she wants to go to college. Gigi is our version of Georgiana Darcy, who is Fitzwilliam Darcy's younger sister in the books, So she is off, she is having adventures, she's trying to figure herself out. And so she comes to this town that's beta testing this new technology that her brother's company has developed. And we have the plots of the people who live in the town, but also I think I'll tell the next bit after we watch the clip, actually.
So Griffin, let's roll our clip from Sanditon.
Hi everyone, this is so exciting. I am on my way right now to Sanditon, California for the Domino beta release. That's right, Pemberley Digital's life-revealing platform is back. Now, in case you didn't see the alpha test videos, some of them got a little, well, maybe too life-revealing. But that just means we learned a lot about all kinds of things. And I mean, that's the point of testing, right? And now the terms of service are super clear and we've disabled the auto-upload feature. Thank goodness. So for all of you out there in Sanditon, I look forward to seeing how you use Domino. I'll be posting update videos here at least once a week, and we'll see what develops together. Not that this is about me. I'm going to Sanditon as a helper, an observer. My job is to help tell the town story, not become the story. This is going to be so much fun. I will see you guys soon.
There we go.
There we are. Yes.
I hope she didn't have to hold that camera the whole time by herself. That would be really uncomfortable.
Generally, what we did when we were shooting something like that is we would have a camera operator and the actor would hold the operator's wrist.
Okay.
So it looks like
Right.
they're holding the camera,
Right.
but without them having to both perform
Yep.
and worry about the shot simultaneously.
Yep. Makes sense.
But yeah, it was so striking watching that clip. I had forgotten the actress who played Gigi Allison and the actor Daniel who was playing Darcy. They look so much like brother and sister. Like even they were remarking on it. It's like, yeah, we look more like each other than we look like our actual siblings.
Yeah.
But from that clip, one of the things we kind of hinted at that we're like, well, eventually people will pick up on it, is that we had created our characters and their stories, but really we wanted the fans to fill in the rest of the town. And so we posted that on, I think, like a Friday, and then the show was going to start early the next week on Monday again. By the time we started on Monday, people had created so many role-playing accounts on Twitter that Twitter had started blocking them, assuming they were a form of spam.
Oh my God.
It was like the people who were really into it just ran with it. And we had people who created versions of themselves that were in this town, Sanditon, and why they lived there and what they were excited about doing. And then we'd have people who invented other Twitter accounts, like we had the Sanditon Dragon, we had Grandpa's Chair, which sat on the porch and complained about, like the young people sitting in the yard, stuff like that.
Wow.
People invented their own businesses. We had like 73 yarn shops, 92 bookstores. It was just the
And that's
library,
like-
the hospital. And
That's one of the things that's so amazing about internet content and sort of engaging that level of fan creativity. And I think it's something that's particularly unique to kind of female-oriented content. I've seen kind of a philosophy of like how male fans versus female fans kind of engage with material, and that male fans are often kind of collectors. So that's the idea of like knowing everything about something and kind of guarding this knowledge and sort of, the questions you get, oh, you're a real Batman fan? Then what episode did X, Y, and Z happen in? Whereas female fans tend to, and this is extremely stereotypical, but like engage with things creatively. So whether it's fan fiction, whether it's cosplay, whether it's that kind of interaction with the narrative in the same way. So I don't know, were you seeing kind of that gender breakdown in terms of who was reacting to things? Could you tell on Twitter?
I don't know. I mean, that's
So-
the thing. It's like you never know. Like somebody might be presenting a female character, and actually in life they identify as a dude, and vice versa. We had one small group of fans that like they created their own characters and had their own epic romance that played out over the course of the summer. They were putting together their own writers' rooms, and they were figuring out, they had journal content and this and that, the interaction with each other.
Yeah.
Like they were literally running their own show just inside the frame. Like I think they may have produced more content for Sanditon than we did, in all honesty. They did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it was one of the episodes that I was watching definitely was cutting to people who were clearly kind of internet, YouTubers on their own right, who had their own stories that they'd created. And so like, I assume that sort of once they kind of opt into that, then were you more or less free to kind of, pull their stuff into your own episodes, or would you kind of communicate back and forth with them about, hey, we'd like to use your stuff. Is that okay with you? How did that process work?
Well, because that was the thing. We definitely wanted to foreground fan content, in part because, we were sort of putting this together, to be blunt, on short notice in some ways. And again, we're working with kind of limited resources, as you always are. And so our idea was once a week we would run, like, the Monday episode would be our characters in a traditional video format, and the Thursday episode would be looking at how the fans had reacted to the stuff on Monday. And so it'd sort of be that digest of what was going on in the town.
Interesting.
We wound up interspersing the Thursday episodes. About half of them turned into Clara does ice cream videos because we got some money. It's like, we need food-oriented content. I'm like, well, she's an ice cream shop owner. Can she just do, like, ice cream stuff? And I'm like, great. And we're like, all right, we'll do videos of her doing ice cream. And those were a lot of fun and helped us sort of forward her romantic subplot in those videos. But so we partnered with a platform which I do not believe is still existent, called Theatrics, which is basically designed to let people upload their own video content, but it's all in, like, the Sanditon overall channel.
Got it.
So everyone has their own accounts, but you can look through. It's like, oh, this is what people are doing. And part of our agreement on that was, if you upload through this platform, we might use it for one of our compilation videos.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was like the people who got into it got really into it. The people who it was not their cup of tea really disliked it. So it was just, it was
So
one
even
of those
people who were
things.
Lizzie Bennet fans who kind of enjoyed that level of narrative when it kind of got into the fan creation side were a little less, or like,
I think
did you have a sense of how that broke down in terms of?
I think it was partially people who didn't, either didn't have time or didn't have inclination to throw themselves quite so deeply into this world, but also, feeling like you're missing out on something, and nobody likes to feel like they're missing out on things. Also, you're coming out of Pride and Prejudice, which is a story that everybody knows, and even as you get, these early episodes where it's like Lizzie with cats and chinchillas, and only vaguely ties into the book, but you know where the book is going. And one of the things I think we learned in Sanditon is, like, we had to signal very early on what kind of story this was and where it was happening. Like, when our leads finally got together, people were like, finally, there's,
Yeah.
finally, I know what this is about. And it's like, oh, yeah, we knew that we were going there.
Right.
But,
Right.
But yeah, so it's one of those things. Like, I called up one of our actors at one point. It's like, look, we know that feedback we're getting and people who love it, and then some people really needed to let us know that they didn't. And I called up one of our actors and said, I just want you to know, it's like, we're very pleased with what you're doing. We believe in the project.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've worked on so many projects where, like, we couldn't pay people to watch it. I'm just thrilled that people are tuning in. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So one of the things that I don't know if we want to talk about it like now or kind of talk about Bookburners first, but when we were communicating over email, I was like, I'm really interested in developing sort of long serial narratives this way, which obviously TV does spectacularly well. But when you're talking about sort of the YouTube space, the idea of somebody sitting down to watch 100 episodes is really kind of astonishing, even if the episodes are only about 3 minutes long. But knowing kind of how to keep people engaged, coming back day after day, week after week. And then with Sanditon, you were saying kind of a narrative that people are less familiar with, and learning that, like, maybe you needed to signal things a little earlier in the story. What have you kind of taken out of those two experiences in terms of how to set up a long-term narrative? And particularly one that doesn't have a story that you're pulling from necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know if this answers your question or not, but as you're talking, what I'm sort of thinking of is, like, I think the internet is really well positioned for very long-term narrative, especially as TV becomes, like, the shortened seasons and the sort of event or anthology is coming back into vogue. It used to be, you'd watch, you get 26 episodes of your network 1 hour that then runs for 8 seasons. And now, we're seeing more of, it's more contained. This is the thing, you're getting a season of it, or you're getting
binge watch
4
phenomena.
seasons of it, the binge phenomenon. Whereas on the internet, I think there is that culture of, and you're referencing fan fiction earlier, people who are consuming internet content, you get used to the series that runs for maybe millions of words that you're just coming back day after day, and it keeps going. I think, this actually ironically goes kind of back to networking that we were talking about at the beginning, but I think the key, and one of the keys to Lizzie Bennet's success, because, although we had some momentum out of the gate, we go to conventions, like we went to LeakyCon or things like that, and we'd be doing a panel, and I remember Bernie would get up and say, how many of you guys have been watching the show since like episode 10 or earlier? And you get a handful of hands going up. And it's like, all right, how many of you have been watching since episode 25? And it's sort of like, when did people come into the series? Huge majority of the people who have come out to a fan panel at a convention, like this is some dedicated fandom. Most of the people in that room got into it either around episode 60 when Darcy showed up, or around episode 80 where it's sort of, the fit was hitting the shan in various plot-related ways. And that, I think, one of the key things that really helped Lizzie Bennet that a lot of web series weren't doing at the time is we had 2 episodes a week for 50 weeks. You had more than not to mention the additional video content, Lydia's vlogs that would go up, or Collins and Collins or something like that. You had so many opportunities to find us, and we were around for so long. There are a lot of really good series, but even something like Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, where, there you've got Joss Whedon behind it, which definitely helps with the discovery, but there were only 3 episodes of it. It's a very short event. And the number of times somebody has to recommend something to you before you're actually like, okay, I'm gonna go check that out. Like, we all know, it's like somebody recommends a book to you, and like the 5th person who recommends the book to you,
that's when you go out and buy it.
That's when you buy the book, or when you decide, I'm never reading this book, screw it. Either way, but there were so many opportunities for discoverability.
So and I think that's interesting, because it almost combines the idea of like having bite-sized content that people can kind of enjoy, but also having the binge experience. So if you're joining at episode 60, you're getting the binge experience, but you're still going to get that twice a week sort of jolt of story adrenaline to kind of keep you going forward. So that's interesting. So when I was being interviewed 2 weeks ago by Stephen, I was talking about the fact that I have a little publishing company, and one of the things I really was excited about doing on the internet was short comic stories. There isn't really a market for short stories in comics. Anthologies are always kind of tricky, and that's something that I really was proud of doing, and I like kind of working with new artists that way. But the thing about webcomics is everybody wants the thing that's been running for 5 years already. So, and kind of going through that backlog, and then again getting that weekly update factor. So
it's like you have to have something that will give you the momentum to keep going for 5 years, so that you can become the thing that was going for 5 years. Absolutely.
That's I mean, that's sort of the secret to internet success is keep doing it until you're big enough to be successful, kind of. Like
which is the nicer version of it's like, how do I have a successful blog? I don't know, start it 10 years ago.
So let's talk about
segues.
Speaking of segues, let's talk about Serial Box and Bookburners. So describe what Serial Box is for people who don't know.
Serial Box is a publishing company that was designed to do serial fiction and audiobooks on the web, with the idea of, instead of having one author write basically a novel and then put up a chapter every week, they want to bring together a group of writers, like you might get in a TV-style writer's room, who would break a season of adventures and then write, and we call them episodes, so that every week you get an adventure with characters that are going to be back next week, And over the course of, 10, 13, 16 of these, you also get a larger story arc playing out. But the idea is that every week you do get that kind of, you get the candy of, it's like, here's an adventure.
Yeah.
Something that's short enough for you to read on your commute or listen to on your
Please don't read
commute.
while you're driving.
Yeah. Some places you don't have to drive when you're commuting. So
Yes.
if you're on a train, you
Yes.
can read it. If you're in your car, you should use the audiobook version. But so that it's about a 45-minute read or an hour and change to listen to. As people are busy, but the research shows that people read a lot.
Yeah.
People are like, I don't have time to read books. It's like, yeah, but we're reading long-form articles. We're reading, short stuff on the internet. There's a lot of reading going on, and this was designed to sort of try to create fiction for people who don't have time to sit down for 6 hours and read a book.
Interesting. So we have a lovely trailer for that as well. So Griffin, roll.
It's so exciting.
It is so exciting. As when Griffin was putting the clips together for this, he's like, this looks so cool. This is such a great trailer. So I was like, good job, guys.
Yeah. No, they don't actually burn books. That's a pejorative name used for people who don't like them.
So tell me how you got involved in this.
I got involved with Bookburners, which is the serial that I write for, because the publisher, Julian Yap, who co-founded the company or founded the company. I apologize, Julian, if I got your credit wrong. But I knew him through mutual friends, and he had brought together this group of basically novelists. Bookburners was the first serial that they put out. And he brought together a group of novelists. It was like, if we're going to have a TV-style writer's room, maybe we should have a writer involved who's actually been
In a
in
TV writer's
style
room.
writer's room. So he called me up, and it's like, are you interested in doing this? And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
I'm like, we'll fly you to Boston. So, I go out, we meet for basically a long weekend where we took the premise, which is that we have this team that works for a black budget arm of the Vatican who is charged with keeping, magic and, they call them demons because,
Okay.
they
Because
work
the
for the
Vatican.
church because
Yeah.
so it's like evil magical things. They're
Sure.
demons. We make few cosmological assumptions, but but there are books that bind these forces, and basically our team is charged with somebody will open up one of these books, mayhem ensues. Our team has to go in and figure out how to close the book and get everything back, and then they take the book and bring it back to the secret archives at the Vatican, because taking all these magical books and putting them together in the same place, that can't possibly
Seems
go
like
wrong.
not really a great idea.
Solid planning
But-
there. But yeah, so we come in, and over the course of the long weekend, and we just did this for season 4, actually, the writing team will sort of break, all right, this is where the story is going this season. These are the steps we think it needs to take to get there. We'll sort of break out the episodes that way and say, all right, you're going to write that one, and I'm going to write this one. And then we send everybody home to work on their outlines, and then we continue to collaborate over basically GChat.
Is there someone who's kind of a showrunner for each series, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally, for us, it's Max Gladstone.
Okay.
For Tremontaine, it's obviously
Ellen Kushner. Yep.
And so you'll have the creator will sort of take the lead, and that's useful to have. So if there's somebody who's like, no, this is the direction we're going.
And they're like, maybe not.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how has your experience in both TV and then in serialized web content from a visual side sort of influenced what you've done with Bookburners? Do you feel like there were lessons that you've learned that you've applied, or is it like, because it's prose, is it a completely different experience?
I think it has been really useful in part because, story is story. I don't think there's a single screenwriter who started, the first thing that you brought to your parents when you were a kid was like in screenplay format. Like, no, we generally start from fiction. So I'd done some prose. I'd published a couple short stories, but there was a learning curve on these. Like, all right, this is how I write a novelette. But in terms of breaking the story, in terms of saying it's like, all right, this is what we need to know before the end of the weekend, because if we don't, we're going to be going off in odd directions. The thing we discovered actually is that all of us in our group on Bookburners, even though I was the only TV writer in the group, everybody has experience with tabletop gaming and or being a musician.
Interesting.
And it's all collaborative storytelling.
Right.
So if you're playing in a good D&D campaign, you know how to be in a room and somebody suggests a story and you're like, okay, yes, and what about we take it this direction? And it's a very transferable skill set.
So it didn't feel like everybody was kind of starting from very different places. You were a lot more unified in your sort of narrative backgrounds than you might expect? Or?
Yeah, people are like, oh, how do you deal with like the fights and the egos? It's like, we don't really have a ton of those because like we're all invested in it together. It's not like, it's like, my ideas are going to be the, and it's like, no, it's like good ideas win, and somebody has a good one, then you get to also use it. They'll take it in their episode and you can take it and run with it in yours.
Right.
So.
Okay, so we're starting to run out of time, but so tell me about kind of what you're working on in the near future, something that you're excited about, something you want people to check out.
Something I'm really super excited about, though you'll have to mark your calendar to check this out. I just finished writing for the new Dark Crystal TV show, which is coming to Netflix in 2019.
Oh my God.
So set a reminder for that one, though I am sure that Netflix and Henson will want to tell you about that.
Congratulations.
Before it happens. But that is super exciting. It's a great group of people who are working on it. I think if I say too much more, I'll be smothered by Muppets in my sleep.
Yeah, I'm going to be like,
But it's going to be really, really cool, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And Bookburners Season 3 is wrapping up right now, and Season 4 will be coming out next summer.
Fantastic.
So, if it's new to you, you have plenty of binging that you can do.
We need to have you back at some point because I think I could talk to you for another 5 or 6 hours, but we want to try and let people get on with their day. So
it seems fair. We didn't even get to our cute shoes.
Yeah, right? Next episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. Thanks everybody for checking us out, and hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like Butcherbird Studios on Facebook so you can see our weekly invites to the next thing that we're going to be doing. And we'll see you next week at 11 a.m. Thanks, guys.
Bye.